This is Amplify Your Podcast. I'm Sarah Lepe, your coach for clarity, confidence, and connection behind the mic. If you're ready to lead with your voice and amplify your impact, you're in the right place. Welcome back to Amplify Your Podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Lepe, and today we're going to talk about the 4 core reasons your podcast might not be growing and what actually changes the game when it comes to this. So if you've been feeling like you've been doing all the things, you're posting on social media, you're showing up and you're recording every week, and you're even batching your episodes, you're getting ahead, but the growth of your show just isn't matching up with your effort, you are not alone, my friend. Most podcasters think that they need to work harder, they need to push more, maybe you need to master yet another platform. But what actually grows your podcast isn't more. It's having alignment. And I've actually created a framework called the Grow Method, and it's how I help my current podcasting clients shift in their shows from being plateaued to powerful. And today I'm going to give you a sneak peek into the growth method that I use with my clients. So let's take a second and let's walk through this together. So the first pillar is clarity. And when it comes to getting clear on things, you can't grow what you haven't claimed. And most shows stay stuck because their message is foggy. It's not clear. I can't tell you how many shows I've come across, and sometimes I've listened to them and I'm like, wait a minute, like the cover isn't matching what this podcast claims to be about. I'm a little bit confused here as to what the overall arching message is from this show. And so for you as a podcaster, if you don't know exactly who you're speaking to and what your podcast stands for, your audience isn't going to know either. And that's not a good thing. So in order to get clear on this, there's a couple of things you can do to ask yourself. So first of all, can you describe your show in 5 words or less? So think about this. If you are going out to dinner with friends, people are wondering what you're up to. Like, oh, hey, Sarah, I know you just came out with a new podcast. Tell us what it's about. Am I able to tell them in a couple words or less what my show is about? And if someone listens to one episode of your show, could someone repeat your episode as far as what the talking points were or what the show could be about? And if you're finding that you can't do either one of those things, or if somebody has listened to your show and they really don't know what it's about, you might have a problem here with the clarity. And I can think about when I did Rebranded Athlete, I had a really hard time articulating who that show was for that I created. I mean, I knew that I spoke to former athletes, but I was still trying to figure out what I wanted to say. So the show really never had a clear direction as far as where it was going. It was purely about stories of athletes transitioning into life after sports, but there was no directional thing as far as where the show was going to go beyond that type of a conversation. And I even remember I was too afraid to even ask people to check out my coaching program or go and buy my book. And now that I think about that, especially after all the clients I've worked with, and you guys know the ones who have worked with me, and I talk about this all the time, that your podcast is your biggest asset for your business when it comes to marketing. And before you even get to the point where you have sponsors on your show, you should be the sponsor for your show and the products and the things that you're offering. And so when we try to be too broad and we don't really know who we are trying to show up for, you attract all kinds of different people that may not necessarily be the ones who you want the show to be about. And so the other thing you need to be really open about too is that you are not for everybody, and that's okay. Actually, I think it's best that you're not for everyone. You want to be for a specific type of person because the message that you have on your show, what you're trying to create, is going to resonate with a certain type of people if you are clear on your show and you don't have a foggy option there. So first things first, you definitely have to get clear. Second thing is you got to have confidence. And so if you yourself, if you don't trust your voice, your audience is not going to trust your voice either. So you got to have that confidence, but the confidence doesn't have to come from having it all figured out. All right. When we first start a podcast, honestly, none of us have it figured out. We figure it out along the way. And for those of you who have businesses, it's the same type of thing. You at least have a vision of where you're wanting to head, but you step by step put things into play. And it comes from repetition, right? So it comes from actually showing up, putting in the reps, and the more you do that, the clearer you're going to get. And for any of my athletes out there, it's the same thing with any basic fundamentals that you'd go to a practice at and your coaches are having you do the basics, the stuff that you learned maybe as a very young person when you first got into your sport. That's doing the free throws. If you're in volleyball, you're serving. If you're in football, you're doing footwork. Like these are the foundational things that you got to show up and you got to put the reps in order for you to build that confidence. And it's okay to sound nervous. Like even the top people out there, like I'm sure Oprah, I'm sure Lewis Howes, like all the greats out there, they sounded nervous the first time they got behind the microphone, and that's okay. And it's also okay to fumble on your words. None of us are perfect. And when you go out and have a conversation with people, we're not editing our real life conversations, right? Like you're going to fumble upon your words, and that's okay for you to do within your show. And the one thing I would say that is not okay is to hold back the truth that someone needs to hear from you. And so by you not showing up confidently and having your voice out there are people that are going to miss out on the message that you have. And your audience is craving someone real. They don't want anybody fake. Like there's enough stuff out there, you guys, of people showing up inauthentically, showing up as people who are not themselves. And that's like the worst thing that we can do is get behind this microphone and feel like we've got to show up as somebody who is not authentically us. Be you. That's what people are going to gravitate to. And I've talked about this before, like I've showed up with that quote unquote, like Principal Sarah voice where it's definitely not me, where it has to be that polished, scripted, and safe. Like I can't say the wrong things. And now I'm like, hell no, I want to just show up as me. And the more I lean into that natural tone, like I'm talking to somebody that's a friend next to me, the more I'm going to feel connected and the more that the listener is going to feel connected as well too. So also think about podcasts that you love. Aren't they the ones where it feels like that host is actually talking to you and they're not talking at you like a lecture? No one is showing up to podcasts because they want to be lectured. They're showing up because they want to have these real, authentic conversations. And they also want to hear from you as the expert in whatever it is that you're doing, but you don't have to do it sounding like a robot. Like, relax. Remember, it's okay to feel nervous. It's okay to fumble upon your words, but the more you show up, the more confidence you're going to have and the easier it becomes behind the mic. The third thing that I talk about all the time with my clients is consistency. So a lot of podcasters have what I call pod fade, where they start podcasting and then they get overwhelmed with all the things and then they stop hitting record. This is almost like ghosting your own show. And it's not because you're getting lazy. It's because you are super overwhelmed by all the things you have to do with podcasting. Like people get into podcasting because they think, oh, it'll be super easy. I can do it on my phone. I can just show up and record and upload it real quick and that's it. There's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes with podcasting. And for you to just get super overwhelmed and stop, like you're not doing yourself any service, and neither are the listeners and the potential people who want to work with you would be either. So I have seen it over and over again. If you don't have a plan, you're going to end up putting way too much pressure on yourself and you're going to burn out. And if you don't have any systems, you are just going to drain your energy and it's not going to be fun anymore. So you want to make sure you've got sustainable things in the process, because otherwise your podcast is going to end up being a really expensive hobby. And that's the last thing that you want to do. So if you're asking yourself, all right, Sarah, what can I do to fix that? First of all, you want to create some type of a system that's going to support your lifestyle. So for me, currently at the moment when I'm recording this, I still have a current 9 to 6 job that I work 5 days a week. And on a good week, I'm working 40 hours. Sometimes it's a lot more than that. So it's like, where do I find the time to be my best, to have that energy and to find what works for me in order to show up and record in a way that supports the things that I do. And so that is definitely not showing up the night before like I did with my first podcast when I was a principal. I learned from that experience that I wanted to make sure that I had a system where I could record in batches and not have to worry about recording for a few weeks at a time. So even right now, my plan today is to record a couple of episodes. I'm recording on a Sunday afternoon. My podcast doesn't launch for at least another week, so I want to make sure that I've got these things in process so that I'm not overwhelmed. And that for me helps to take off a lot of pressure. It ensures that I show up behind the mic again with that authentic self because I'm not concerned about, oh my God, I got to get this done. It's helping me to not have that pressure and not get that burnout either. And the other thing that I love doing with podcast content is also repurposing it. So you record one episode, you get some social clips out of it. You can get some quotes that you could put on a Canva template. You could also take the transcript from your podcast, put it into ChatGPT, have it write your weekly newsletter that you're sending out to your list or putting your blog on your website. There's so many different ways to repurpose your content so that you end up being consistent with it. And if you get to the point where you need to take a break, and it's okay to take a break, you guys, but you got to plan it out because people are expecting to have your show up each and every week. And if you don't have shows consistently that you are publishing, that you are putting out there, people are going to go find another podcast episode. So it doesn't mean that you got to work yourself to death and show up each and every week. It just means you got to be smarter with it and take a planned break. So what does that look like? That could be recording some more batch episodes ahead of time. It could also look like you're repurposing maybe some older episodes that you have. So for example, if you had 50 plus episodes, maybe you want to go back to some of your earlier shows and bring those back up to the top. So if it was like episode 7 that really resonated with your audience, maybe you want to make that episode 56 and say, hey, this week I wanted to bring this episode back up because this was a show that resonated with a lot of you. And I know I've had a lot of new followers since, and I thought that this would be a great episode to revisit, yada, yada, right? So there's tons of different ways that you can do that as well. And so remember, the momentum doesn't come from you in that constant hustle. It comes from you finding your rhythm, doing the systems, putting those into place so that you can show up with more authenticity and you don't get burned out. And the last thing I want to talk about with my growth method is connection. All right. So even though you're behind the microphone, your job isn't to talk, you guys. It's to resonate with your audience. And I know that sounds like, wait a minute, that sounds really weird, right? Like you don't want me to talk behind the mic. No, I definitely do want you to talk, but nobody wants to hear you ramble. They want to resonate with you. They want to make a connection. So if you can publish an episode every single week, you're still not going to grow. You need to connect with your audience. And so things that you can think about if you ask yourself, am I letting my audience in? Or is this show purely about me and what my needs are? Do I make a space for my listener's voice? So are you hearing the types of things that your followers are wanting to dive deeper into? Are you listening to their pain points? Are you talking about the types of things that they're wanting to hear? So having that connection with them in order to resonate is huge for your podcast. And with the podcast that I had with Rebranded Athlete, I didn't have too much personal storytelling like I did in the beginning of the podcast. And then when I had guests on my show, I really talked more about everybody else's journey and I'd throw in a few things here or there, but it wasn't so much about my personal journey, especially where I was in that moment in time. I talked a lot about what happened during that transition when I was going from college athletics into the real world, but not really relating it to how I was in the moment 15, 20 plus years out and how I was still able to make connections with my audience within that time. And for this show, I plan on doing a whole lot more of the connection with you guys and telling you more about my story, as you'll see in these episodes coming up. And remember, like, your content makes somebody feel seen, heard, and inspired to move, then you know you're making a connection. And you're not just building a podcast, you are building a relationship with the other person on the other side in their headphones, listening to your show, because that type of relationship is going to instill the values going back to number one that we had talked about with clarity within your show. When you get clear, when you build your confidence and you show up with consistency, you're going to make that connection with your audience, and in turn, you're going to continue to grow your show. All right, so that brings us to the end of the show today. If this episode had you nodding along and you're realizing now that your show might be stuck in one of these 4 areas, let's talk. You can DM me the word Amplify on Instagram at Sarah_Lepe, and I'll tell you more about the podcast growth audit that I offer to people just like you if you're having difficulty in this area, and also a group coaching program that I've got in the works that's going to be coming up soon. Because remember, growth doesn't start with the content that you have as a podcaster. It starts with the alignment. All right, I'll see you in the next episode. Take care. Thanks for tuning in. If this episode shifted something in you, please share it with somebody else. And if you're ready to grow your podcast by growing into your voice, DM me the word Amplify and I'll show you how we can work together. Remember, your voice is powerful and your message matters. I'll see you next time.